Hey there, and we are live from Take a Hike Studios just outside of Dallas, Texas. I'm your host, Christian Tatch, and this is College Football Now. Before we get started, I want to go over a couple of ground rules. Absolutely no politics, no attacks on race, religion, creed, gender, or sexual preference. Let's keep it simple, and let's talk college football. All right, guys. Well, week 7 is in the books, and it was a good one. Probably one of the best weekends overall of the season. A lot of good games to talk about, a lot of things happening. So let's jump right in and let's get started. One of the things that really made this weekend interesting was the number of ranked matchups and a couple of big rivalry games. So let's get started on some of those games. All right, so a couple of other little games that went on, not little games, but ones that didn't get as much attention. Miami upsets number 20 Virginia at home, 17-9. Miami was 2-3, Virginia was 4-1. Miami relied on their defense in this one. Virginia just couldn't get anything going. They had 250 pass yards, but stalled in the red zone each time they got close. Another one is number 2 Clemson took care of business on the road at Florida State. Normally a rivalry game. Last few years, not much going on there. Clemson had 232 pass yards, but they also had 320 yards on the ground. Etienne had a great day, but it was actually amongst several rushers on that Clemson team. Number 1, Alabama went on the road, showed its strength against number 24, Texas A&M, winning 47-28. Game was never in danger for Alabama. A&M scored first, but for the first time this season, they scored on their opening drive. After that, Alabama was just great on every side of the ball. Every phase of the game. The Texas A&M offense stuttered through most of the game. They had a couple of drives or several drives that were good. Helped a little bit by a couple of penalties. They still just don't look like where they should be offensively. The big Alabama receivers torched the Aggies defense for almost 300 yards. This is something that the Alabama team has that's probably one of their best receiving corps as a complete group that I've seen them have in quite some time. Every one of their receivers is big, fast, strong, atypical NFL receivers. I think you'll see all of them playing on Sundays. Waddle is just a beast when it comes to returning punts, kicks, and as a receiver. They can all block. He can break tackles. He's got tremendous speed. Again, just torch the A&M defense. And actually, big story of that game was the field position. The Aggies are very proud about their tradition in the special teams arena. I think they've only allowed 2 or 3 special teams touchdowns in their entire history. They didn't allow any this week, but, the Aggie punter kicker, Braden Mann, I think he had 4 tackles or at least assists and 1 major tackle to stop a punter kick return. That's ridiculous when they get that much going in there. So, anyways, moving on. Number 8, Wisconsin blanked Michigan State at home 38-0. Look, Wisconsin has allowed a total of 29 points all season long. They allowed 14 to Michigan and 15 to Northwestern. The other 4 games, they blanked their opponents on defense. I know a lot of the talk is about their offense, especially their running game, but their defense is doing their job as well. I think they're a force to contend with. They're just outside of being able to be considered for the top 4 spots of the playoffs. The Big Ten Conference is going to come down to Wisconsin and Ohio State, in my opinion, and I'm not sure right now what could happen in that game. Ohio State is also looking unbeatable. This is going to be 2 immovable forces meeting against each other. That's going to be an awesome game here in a few weeks. They have a running back there in Wisconsin that is just a beast. I haven't seen a running back like this in college football in a very long time. Over 820 yards so far this season, but he can also block. Still averaging, what is that? Almost 8 yards a carry. It's just crazy. Absolutely crazy. Number 9, Notre Dame fends off USC by 3 points. Big rivalry game. USC is not ranked. However, they have played very well this year. They're moving back in to where they want to be. I think next year they are going to be in the rankings and they're going to stay there most of the season. They've got a lot of good pieces in place there. Next up, we've got number 18, Baylor. They're 5-0 now after a very close overtime win against Texas Tech. Number 17, Arizona State, still finding a way to win, beating Washington State 38-34. Number 19, an undefeated Wake Forest loses a sling fest to Louisville to get knocked out of the rankings. Still having a good season there at Wake Forest. A little bit of a surprise. We're going to see how the rest of their schedule shapes up. They still have to play Clemson, and that's probably one they're not going to win either, but I have a feeling they're looking at a very good bowl game by the end of the year by the way they're playing now. Number 5, LSU is able to capitalize on a ton of mistakes, pull away in the fourth quarter to get a much-needed win at home against number 7, Florida, 42-28. LSU allowed 310 pass yards to a QB that was starting his very first road game. Now, sometimes that can be dangerous because you don't have a lot of good film on a quarterback that's only played 1 game so far in the season. That game was at home. They didn't know really how to plan with that. However, they handled it well. They made adjustments going into the second half and were really able to start shutting them down. And LSU wide receiver Jamar Chase accounted for 127 receiving yards. Big day for him. LSU, I still think, is working out a couple of kinks. But, man, I'm very impressed with LSU this year on both sides of the ball. We're going to talk more about this topic a little bit later on and over the next coming weeks. They have a game against Alabama in 3 games, and let me tell you something. I tell you what, that's going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight. And that's what I'm seeing right now. I think maybe this is the year LSU is going to beat Alabama. However, moving on. Number 6, Oklahoma survives a brutal game against number 11, Texas, in another great showdown in Dallas. They win 34-27. This game was fun to watch. It really was. But there was a lot of things to take notice in this. And let's start with some stats here. Jalen Hurts threw for 235 yards and ran for another 131 yards. CeeDee Lamb had 10 receptions for 171 yards. Look, the Texas defense had at least 3 bouts of horrendous tackling that very well kept the Sooners in control of the game. Texas was playing on their heels most of the game, and I believe it had a lot to do with that tackling and what Oklahoma was throwing at them. Let me say something here. And I said in the beginning of the season, I believe Texas is back. I believed that they had a chance to really take on and win the conference. They still have an outside chance of doing that and possibly make the playoffs. But look, when I say the words Texas is back, I may not mean it like everybody else. And there's a lot of Texas fans that started the season saying that, and now they're going, well, maybe they're not really back. No, they are. But to me, the words Texas is back, relates to the long period of time, especially under head coach Mac Brown, where they were winning 9, 10 wins every year. Okay? They have that. Now, were they in the national championship every year? No. And when I say Texas is back, I don't think that they're national championship team yet now. But they're on the right track, and there's not a single game this year that they cannot win, including the 2 that they lost. That's what I mean by Texas is back. I fully believe that they are. They're going to continue to do well. They've got a couple of rough games ahead. Of course, you have your Thanksgiving weekend game with Texas Tech. That's always a good rivalry game to watch. Not to mention the showdown against Baylor, who I just mentioned is undefeated. So right now, the Big 12 is kind of up in the air between 3 teams, actually. And those 3 teams are Oklahoma and Baylor tied for first, and Texas is very much a contender for the conference. I am going to say this, and I don't mean to make Longhorn fans mad. At this point in the game with 2 losses, should Texas find a way to win the conference, I do not believe that will allow any Big 12 teams in the playoffs. When it comes to playoff hopefuls coming out of the Big 12, I do believe this year, much like last year, Oklahoma is the Big 12's best chance to make it into the playoffs. So, that being said, another game we got is another big one that happened, and this one rocked the landscape. I love games that can kind of shake things up. 2-3, South Carolina goes on the road, stifles number 3 Georgia 20-17 to change the landscape of the top 10. This one was done in overtime, and wow. Now, I think a lot of what happened in that game was Georgia was relying on the fact that South Carolina is kind of an unknown. They had a backup quarterback starting the game. They know that they had a strong running game, which is not the Georgia defense main concept this year, believe it or not. It gave them some problems. The second-string quarterback from South Carolina gets hurt. The third-string quarterback comes in. No, he didn't have the greatest of games, but there's no game film on him. They had no idea what he's capable of, so they had to change their defensive style. South Carolina and head coach Will Muschamp out there really, they played that to their advantage, and it worked. Great job. Couple of missed field goals. Blankenship, who is a definitely celebrity in Georgia, and everybody around the country following college football knows him, knows that he is typically clutch. Missed 2 game-winning or game-tying field goals, and that really hurt them in the end. And, man, what a gutsy game. Great job by South Carolina. Congratulations. Knocking off number 3 Georgia on the road. Now, moving forward a little bit, let's have some fun. As you can see there in the fan chat, I have posted the phone number in which you can call. Also, if you have a question or topic that you'd like to discuss and you don't want to actually do the calling in, feel free to PM me there on Facebook using the Facebook Messenger, or if you happen to have my personal cell number, go ahead and text me your name and number, as well as a topic or question that you have, so I'm prepared, and I can call you live on the air right now. All right, let's talk a little bit about these rankings, shall we? So there was a mix-up in the rankings this week, obviously, with some top teams losing. Let's go over these just real quick, because I tend to agree with the AP poll rankings for the most part this week. And I agree with them more than the coaches' rankings, which is a little odd. Normally, I think the coaches' rankings are a little bit better. But here we go. We've got number 1, Alabama, right? No movement, and nor should they. They did I know everybody's consensus on this one is that Alabama hasn't played anybody yet. They didn't play anybody worth mentioning this week. Even though A&M is struggling this year, they did go on the road at Kyle Field and beat a ranked A&M team in a game that they controlled the whole game. Number 2, LSU jumped up 3 spots from the number 5 spot, and I agree with that. LSU is the only team in the top 10 that has faced and beat 2 top 10 teams when they played them. They beat number 10 Texas at the beginning of the season, and they just beat what was number 7 Florida at home this week. The only top 10 team to do that so far this year, being ranked 5th. I agree with them moving up 3 spots to the number 2 spot. Guys, with the SEC bias, I understand that, but remember, Alabama and LSU do have to play each other in 2 weeks. That is going, or 3 weeks, somewhere around there, I can't remember for sure, but they do play each other. One of those teams will be knocked out of playoff contention during that week. Sitting at the number 3 spot, you do have Clemson. They moved down 1, as they should, with LSU moving up to the number 2 spot. Clemson is going to stay in the top 4 as long as they keep winning, and they will be in the playoffs. They do not have any challenging game left. However, everybody around them does. Alabama and LSU play each other. LSU still has to play Auburn as well in 2 weeks, followed by a road game at Alabama. Ohio State still has to play Michigan, and they still have to play Wisconsin. So they have chances to move out as well. Oklahoma still has to play Baylor, as well as their Bedlam game against Oklahoma State, which Oklahoma State may or may not be ranked at that time, but because it's a rivalry game, it will be taken into consideration. Wisconsin is now at number 5. Okay, moving up 2 spots after their win. Again, they still have to play Michigan and Ohio State as well. Penn State moved up 3 over their big win. Notre Dame moved up 1. Florida moved down 2. Georgia moved down 7 as the biggest drop this week, followed by Auburn and Oregon rounding out the top 12. Utah moved up 2 spots with their win. Boise State stayed the same. Texas moved down 4. Again, appreciate this move just because that makes them the top-ranked 2-loss team in college football right now, which I believe is exactly where they need to be. They didn't move out of the top 15. They're still in the top 15, and when they went out, they could still be right about 10th or 11th at the season end. That is a great position for Texas, especially moving into next year, the direction they're going. I think Texas fans, you should be happy with where you're sitting right now. You have some big games coming up. Let's concentrate on those. Michigan stayed the same. Arizona State moves up 1 after their win. Then you followed by 2 undefeated teams left in the state of Texas, Baylor and SMU, which, by the way, are the only 2 undefeated teams in the state of Texas. We'll talk about their games coming up this weekend here in just a moment. We do have Minnesota, who moved up. They were unranked before this week. They move up. They are 6-0 as well, believe it or not, guys. Now, they've got a tough schedule ahead as well, but watch out for them. They're quietly a 6-0 team. Cincinnati moved up 4 spots after their big win this weekend. Missouri moves up into the rankings. Look, Missouri is 5-1, quietly. Nobody's been paying attention to them, but with their QB transfer from Clemson in the offseason, they have done pretty darn well. Now, they haven't been fully challenged yet. They will be. Next up, you've got Iowa, who moved down 6 after their humiliating loss. Appalachian State has moved into the rankings at 5-0, and Washington is 25th at 5-2. So, by my calculations, I believe I have noticed that all of the unranked teams are now accounted for in the top 25. That brings us to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 unranked, 12 ranked undefeated teams. These next few weeks, Man, this is what we're talking about. Middle to end of October, beginning in November, the meat of everybody's schedule. You start thinning out the herd. Everything starts falling in place as designed. So I'm excited about this coming week. We're going to talk about that here in just a moment. A couple of things I'd like to talk about now. Really, guys, I got to go on a little bit of a rant here. You know, I don't know who all is watching right now, and if my friend Rob is watching, who is pretty familiar with the rules and how reffing actually works across the league, great. Feel free to chime in if you'd like. But I'm seeing a lot of inconsistencies, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. What I'm saying is because you're not going to have the same crews working game to game, all the games. You can't do that. But there are some adjustments to the rules that happened this year. There are some things out there that are for player safety, and those particular rules, I believe, need to be judged the same way each time. I'm a fan of maybe a little bit more of the instant replay on a couple of particular things. Obviously, if you do instant replay to try to overturn or create new penalties, these games will never end. You're going to be talking about 6-7 hour long games. You can't sit there and review an instant replay every hold that happens. Look, there's a hold, I don't know statistically, I mean, anybody can correct me if you want to, but it seems like there's probably an offensive lineman hold on, I'd say, probably 90% of every play in a football game. You can't review all of those, right? And it really depends the severity of it, depends on how blatant it was, so on and so forth. I get that. However, things like open pass interference plays, you're talking about two players against each other one-on-one down the field, the ball's going to the guy. There have been some blatant non-calls or calls that shouldn't have happened, and I believe that those should be accounted for in some way, shape, or form. Maybe they can call at least a challenge flag, because you can't review all of those. Again, the game will be extended way too long. It'll take away momentum. It'll change the dynamic of the game. But they should maybe allow the challenge flag to happen on penalties, especially things like a pass interference. When it looks completely obvious, get it. Maybe they just didn't catch it. Maybe in real time it didn't feel like it was that big of a deal to call it. Or maybe they called it, and if they review it, they realize, okay, maybe not. This is just what I'm talking about. There's a couple of things, and I'm starting to see a lot more of these. There's been some quarterback safety plays, stuff like that I agree with. Some of them I don't, but they're not being called the same from game to game. I think that those being new rules, I'm going to give a season or so to really get a chance to step back, gather a bunch of examples, and hopefully in the off season, those can be addressed. I know that our buddy Rob had mentioned during the first week or two that there is not an actual referee on the committee that makes up these rules. That needs to change. I believe that there needs to be a couple of actual referees or the head of referees or whatever involved in some of these decisions, at least to provide input and possibly, even come up with rules that they feel like need to be done and vote on them or however it is they do it. That's fine. But anyways, that's my rant on the refs right now. The other thing I want to talk about is the transfer portal. And Rob, I'm glad you agree with that the officials need to be a part of writing the rules that they need to enforce. They have a better understanding and I think that they'll be more efficient in calling a lot of these. And even if you take old rules and you have officials amend them with the support or with the influence of the coaches and the other people that are on these committees that are concerned about player safety or concerned about this or the other thing. I'm not saying they shouldn't have an input, but the officials need to write it and they need to have their input as well. It'll be easier for them to enforce these if they have a better understanding of why it's there in place and what they are actually looking for instead of their interpretation of it. The other thing I want to rant about real quick is this, pardon my French, this damn transfer portal. I've ranted about it before and I'm going to do it again. I'm sick and tired of it. I mentioned this before. There are three, and only three acceptable examples right now in my mind, fully acceptable examples of how the transfer portal should be used. One of them was the QB transfer out of Clemson last year that went to the University of Missouri and started playing there. Why do I think that that was an okay thing? Because this quarterback took a team as a starter to the national championship game. He helped a team, the same team, reach the national championship game yet again. He'd gotten hurt during the middle of the season. The backup quarterback came in, took over the starting job, did well, won the starting job. This guy, though, was a junior. He has proven his ability to play. He's proven that he can be an NFL quarterback and probably will be an NFL quarterback. Again, has gone to national championship games, and now he's in a position where he's sitting. I believe that that is an okay reason to transfer once you have proven yourself, and then somehow end up losing the job to maybe a better QB or something like that. Jalen Hurts is the other one with the exact same thing. Took Alabama with 2 national championship games and sat behind the guy who started over him for a full year to help support his team. He came up on a senior year, realized he's good enough to play in the NFL as well. We all agree with that. Took an opportunity to be able to go to another team to be able to be seen playing so he doesn't end his career on the bench when he has the ability to play. The last one that I agree with, again, was a couple years ago with Shea Patterson leaving the University of Ole Miss to the University of Michigan. And the reason why I agree with that one is because this is exactly why the transfer portal was put into place. Really, was if the team that you are playing for gets sanctioned by the NCAA and gets penalized for things that had nothing to do with you, you should be allowed to be able to go to another school and play for them. And I agree with that because this had nothing to do with you. What I don't agree with is the fact that 60 to 70% of the players in the transfer portal right now, and that keep entering the transfer portal, are freshmen. You know what that tells me? That tells me that during the recruitment period, they got to go on a lot of trips. And then when it came down to signing day, they picked a school that had the biggest name in their eyes or had the best situation at that point. They knew they were going to get their name out there. And they knew that on National Signing Day, they can make a big announcement. It'll be televised. It'll be recorded. Everybody's going to cheer and yell, and his name's the big name on campus, and everybody's excited. Then he shows up and realizes that that big name school has a lot of people just like him, and those people might even be a little bit better. So that person doesn't get to start, or that person only gets to see playing time in the fourth quarter, or a play here or a play there, and they automatically assume that they're good enough, they should be starting somewhere else. And they may be right. Maybe they could transfer from somewhere like Nebraska or Michigan or Texas, Oklahoma, Alabama, right? And transfer out of there and go play for a school like Colorado State or possibly SMU or Missouri or something like that, and they're good enough to start there. Then maybe you should have taken your recruiting a little more serious, took into account that you wanted to be a starter as soon as possible in the best scenario for you, but you didn't. And you went to a school that had a big name, that got the big publicity, the big press about you going there, realized you weren't going to get the playing time you felt like you should get, and now you want to leave. You wasted everybody's time, everybody's money, everybody's efforts. I don't believe you should be able to transfer except for extenuating circumstances until at least your junior year. If you're a freshman, sophomore, and again, your school gets your team gets sanctioned, they get penalized, they get something like that. There was something beyond your control or some sort of outlined circumstances. There should be something in place there to keep you from wasting the school's money, who already put scholarship money in your hands, who already put you through part of school, who invited you out to recruiting trips, who they've made trips to your living room, all that stuff. I believe you should stay until at least you're a junior. And when you are a junior, then maybe you should be able to leave if you want to. That's my stance. Sorry if I offended anybody, but I get tired of watching that this year. It's very, very bad. And I have a problem with the fact that this trend is going to continue to grow and grow and grow. And when you do that, and you add on the fact that the state of California has decided to go against the NCAA and pass a bill in that state to allow players to get money from endorsements and autographs and stuff like that. No, this is turning too much into something that college football never was and never should be. I'm never going to say I'm going to stop watching college football, but part of the reason why I watch is because you don't have as much of this stuff like you do in the NFL. Now, I don't know how far that bill in California is going to go. NCAA still can put their foot down on this. I think it was just a strategic move to add more pressure to the NCAA to allow this. I have a feeling it won't go very far. We'll wait and see. Those are my 2 rants for this week. I apologize, but I don't apologize. I think it needs to be put out there, and I think that there are a lot of people that agree with those. Maybe not the fine-tuned points that I threw out there completely, but the overall idea from the people that I've talked to, this is a problem with a lot of people. All right. So, let's talk about some games this week, shall we? All righty, folks. Game number 1, this is Friday night at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. You've got Ohio State at Northwestern. Look, Ohio State is 6-0. Northwestern is 1-4. Do I expect this to be some major upset or even some big exciting game? No, but it's a ranked team playing on Friday night. If you got nothing else to do, check it out. Northwestern lost their games by an average of 10.5 points per game. They are one of only 2 teams to score against Wisconsin this year, though. I don't think any of that helps them against a dominant Ohio State. Ohio State is one of only 3 teams I would say look unbeatable this year. Ohio State by 21 at least. But might be something to watch on a Friday night. All right. Next up, we've got number 9 Florida at South Carolina. This is at 11 a.m. on Saturday. Look, Florida just came off of a devastating loss at LSU. They're having a great year and can still win the SEC East. Excuse me. They were beat up a bit last week. South Carolina is on a major high after beating number 3 Georgia on the road. They come back home hungry for a second straight top 10 team upset. I don't think it happens, though. Florida wins by at least 10. Next up, great game in the Big 12. Iowa State heads on the road at Lubbock. Now remember, Iowa State already has a road win in the Big 12. They're looking pretty good this year. Their only 2 losses were by a total of 3 points. Both to ranked teams. A total of 3 points. They lost by 1 to Iowa, and they lost by 2. Can't remember the other one. Sorry. But they lost by a total of 3 points to ranked teams. Texas Tech, on the other side of the ball, is also looking stronger than I expected this year, and stronger than a lot of people expected this year under their first-year head coach. Made a lot of good changes. You can see it on the field. They're still trying to find their own identity. But they're making progress, and I like the way that they're moving out there in Lubbock. Their 3 losses came to ranked teams as well, and all of them on the road. Some say they should have won last week at Baylor. That the refs kind of botched that one and allowed some things, and the next thing you know, it's tied. They're going into overtime. But they're looking to stay undefeated at home. I think Iowa State is trying to make a statement that they can win on the road multiple games in the Big 12 for the first time in many years. I think they're strong enough to do it. I think they can beat Tech through the air and get their second conference road win victory of the season. I do pick Iowa State, but not by the 7-point spread. I believe Iowa State only wins by 3. All right, another big game in the Big 12. TCU travels to Kansas State. Now look, you're talking about 2 3-2 teams, middle of the road Big 12. I get it. But this one's going to be fun. This one's at 1:30 p.m. on Saturday. It's going to be a fun game, I think. I think the two teams match up very well. You got identity struggle versus identity struggle. You've got purple versus purple. Both teams are trying to stay above the 500 mark. Both teams have kind of struggled this year along their way. Neither one of them have a full dynamic of exactly who they are. They have lackluster offenses. I think this will be a defensive-heavy game, not because the defenses are great, but just because the offenses are struggling. However, I do look for TCU to win a close one in Manhattan, probably right around what the point spread is, which is 3.5. All right, moving on over to the SEC. We do have, whoops, sorry about that. I still need that page. Moving over to the SEC, you've got number 2 LSU at Mississippi State. Guys, this is the team this week I'm going to drink the Kool-Aid to. All right. Look, this is a 2:30 game, middle of the day. It's at Mississippi State. Okay. Why am I even talking about this game? Let me tell you why. Mississippi State has struggled a bit this year, as expected. LSU is firing on all cylinders. LSU is starting their 6th straight SEC slate this week. Okay? They have Auburn next week and Alabama in 2 weeks. Well, in 2 games. Are they looking ahead? Is this a trap game? Does Mississippi State have enough bite to take care of this trap game? No, they sure don't. LSU is just too good on too many different levels. They are a point favorite of 19.5. I think they will use this game as a tune-up for the coming weeks. They want to show the country they're not going to slow down after a huge win against number 9 Florida. I think they win by 21, at least. It's just how I feel about it. All right, next up, I do have one other, right? Just one other Big 12 game I want to talk about this week because I think it's a good one. 2 middle-of-the-road teams in the Big 12. 2 good middle-of-the-road teams in the Big 12. You've got an undefeated number 18th ranked Baylor heading to Stillwater to play an unranked 4-2 Oklahoma squad at 3 p.m. Central Time. Why is this a big game? Look, Baylor's having a great start to the season. Starting undefeated and ranked in the top 20. 3 of their last 4 were way too close for comfort for them, including an 8-point win against Rice. Oklahoma lost a close one at Texas. Or Oklahoma State, lost a close one at Texas and let things get away from them in Lubbock. Couldn't catch up. Once Texas Tech realized that what they needed to do, they kept doing it. This is the first true home game since their benefactor, T. Boone Pickens, passed away. I think nothing would make them happier than upsetting a ranked Baylor team this weekend. This is CFB's now upset pick of the week. I do believe that Oklahoma State upsets Baylor at home. And it's going to be a close one. All right. Next up. Okay. Why am I bringing up these 2 teams? Well, I'm going to tell you why. You've got Ole Miss and Texas A&M. Texas A&M is 3-3. Ole Miss is 3-4. This is a 6:30 p.m. game. It's at Ole Miss. Look, Ole Miss has 4 losses, but 2 of them were to ranked teams, including Alabama. All of their losses came against high-scoring offenses. Their defense has definitely struggled, but their offense has also put up some points. Ole Miss has a slightly higher yards per game average offensively than A&M, but has allowed almost 100 yards more per game on defense than A&M has. A&M finally got the offense working last week, And it started with Kellen Mond using his legs, softening the defense to allow for better throws. The running game is still non existent. So it falls all on Mond's shoulders in these games. These things were heavily exposed, and their special teams were heavily exposed last week against Alabama. They have work to do in the secondary. Ole Miss is struggling in the secondary. This is two teams that are not playing where I think they need to be, or where they think they need to be. This is a must-win for both teams, I think, moving forward. But I think A&M can win this one on the road, and more by the 6 point, more than and by more than the 6 point spread that they're given. Now let's talk about some fun games. Next up, number 19, 6-0, SMU hosts Temple, who is 5-1, by the way. Okay. Look, SMU's having a miracle season right now. By the way, this is a 2:30 p.m. game Central Time. SMU's having just about a miracle season. We talked about part of the reason why last week with their transfer players, but this one's a big one for them. Undefeated and ranked for the first time in 33 years after beating a ranked TCU team on the road. If SMU gets by Temple this week, they will only have one more test between them and an undefeated season. But wait a minute. Temple's also having an outstanding year, 5-1 and beating two ranked teams in Maryland and Memphis, knocking Memphis out of the rankings. High-powered offenses do not scare this Temple team at all. Gerald Ford Stadium is not intimidating to visiting teams at all. This is going to be a really fun game to watch. I know we're not talking about power conference teams, but come on, guys. This is a game that even if you're watching other 2:30 games, this is a game that I think you need to keep an eye on. Scoreboard, maybe flip the channel a little bit and take a look at this one. I'm going to be honest with you, for the first time this season, even though SMU is a 7.5 point favorite in this game, I can't pick this one. I do not know. I'm stifled. I even wrote in my notes, I can't pick this one. It's too much. But I can't not try at least. I'm going to take SMU, and I'm going to take them by the points. 7.5 points. I think they can do that if they're motivated. So, that's how that one goes. Next up, another big game out there. Number 17, Arizona State, travels to number 13, Utah. Utah is a 14-point favorite. This is a 5 p.m. Central Time game. Arizona State has played a lot of tight games this year, including their only loss to Colorado by 3 points. Defense has played very well with the exception of their loss, and again against a pass-happy Washington State. On the other side, Utah's only loss came at USC. Their offense is averaging 34 points a game. This one's going to be a fun one here in the Midwest, or there in the Midwest. I do pick the home team at number 13, Utah, but by less than the 14-point spread. Next up, we have number 16, Michigan, at number 7, Penn State. This is a game I get excited about each year. I love watching these two play, especially this time of the season. It's fall, it's football, it's Michigan, it's Penn State. This is fun. Penn State's only favored in this one by 9. They have struggled a little bit this year in certain situations, but Michigan, I think, is in a must-win situation for the rest of the year. And that doesn't bode well for them with matchups against Penn State, Notre Dame, Michigan State, and Ohio State still remaining. Michigan, I know they're a one-loss team right now. I think they finished the season with at least 3 losses, possibly 4. Michigan gave up 25 unanswered points to Illinois and was only up by 3 midway through the fourth quarter. They put 2 scores on the board finally to kind of put it away, but you got to be concerned about that. Penn State's playing pretty good ball right now. They've outscored their opponents 252-49. Okay, they're only allowing about an average of 8 points a game. Their offense can stutter at times, but their defense kind of keeps them going until the offense can catch back up. I believe Penn State wins this one at home by at least 10, giving Michigan their second loss of the season. All right, lastly, let's talk about the game of the week for CFB Now fans. This one's going out west. Pac-12. Number 12, Michigan, at number 25, Washington. Now, if you just look at the rankings, you're going to think, well, Oregon should go in there and take this one. Let me tell you something. This was an epic game last year. Epic game. You're talking about two high-flying offenses. This one is a 2:30 p.m. game as well, Central Time, as it deserves to be. Everybody needs to watch this game. Making this one a late-night game like most of the Pac-12 games won't cut it. This one needs to be exactly in the primetime spot, and they are. Oregon's picked to win by 3. This is how close this should be. All right? This was going to be the matchup of the season out west. It still is. It was going to be the matchup to determine which Pac-12 team will be the first to make it to the playoffs. It isn't. But holy cow, this one will be good. Washington's offense averages 38 points per game. Oregon's offense averages 37 points a game. The big difference maker in this one, Oregon's defense is only allowing just 4 points a game. I don't remember any time that I've ever talked about defense in most of the Pac-12, but especially not at Oregon. Outside of the loss to Auburn in week 1, they've only allowed a touchdown in 1 game since that week 1 Auburn loss. Washington, a matter of fact, all of their games outside of the first Auburn game, they've allowed, 3 points, 6 points, 7 points, and 6 points. That's it. While blowing them out on offense. The teams they've been playing, sure, are very beatable. But still, no other team in the country is playing quite like Oregon is right now. Washington's going to put up some points on this Oregon defense, especially at home. But I believe Oregon wins this one on the road in a very hostile environment. The point spread is 3 in Oregon's favor. I say Oregon wins by 10, and it's going to rely on its defense to do it. However, you watch out for a high-scoring game in this one. This one is going to be so much fun to watch. I cannot wait to turn on the TV during this game. But again, remember, it's around the same time as SMU Temple. You want to know what this guy's going to be watching during the 2:30 time slot? That's right. These fingers right here. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Those are the 2 games to watch midday. Guys, we're really getting to the meat of everybody's schedule. The Big 12, the Pac-10, the Pac-12, or the Big 10, the Pac-12, and the SEC are all in dogfights right now to figure out who's going to end up where, playing their championship games, and see who's going to get the bids for those Final 4 spots going into the playoffs when those star rankings start coming out around the beginning of November. All right, guys, that is the Week 8 update and college football discussion. Again, this will be posted later on. And remember, you can call in. We can take your calls in live, have a conversation, ask me a question, bring up a topic, your opinions. We want it all. If you are added to the Facebook page or the Facebook group, College Football Now, you can always PM me there and let me know ahead of time what your topic is or what question you want to ask. I will, or at least an idea of what the question is, and your phone number. I will call you live during the podcast, answer your questions, and we'll have a discussion. All righty, guys. Until next time, get out there and watch some college football.